are very excited to have on Brandon James. He's a sergeant at a large department in the Pacific Northwest, and he's worked in numerous capacities and specialty units, doing everything from warrant service to narcotics to undercover work. And that is just to name a few. Sergeant James has the reputation of putting family first. That is the message that he conveys to anyone under his supervision and is one of, if not probably the most important characteristic of leadership to him. So, Sergeant James, thanks for taking the time. We know you through a work capacity. So thanks for hopping on. And actually, there's kind of a unique connection to one of our previous guests, Chief Andrew McCurdy. Do you want to talk about like how you know him and his brother and his family?
Yeah, I know his brother, Patrick McCurdy, who is now a King County Sheriff's Office Sergeant. And, when I was a kid, I got introduced to law enforcement. My mom was a manager at the Kingdom, if folks are even old enough to remember the Kingdom. But she employed off-duty officers at the Kingdom. She was in charge of the money room, vault room. And through that, she had a lot of off-duty officers working for her and friends. And so as a kid, when I was 14, 15 years old, I started working down at the Kingdom and being introduced to all these officers. So I was around cops on the good side, and and then kind of the neighborhood I grew up on the bad side too. But through that, I got introduced to the Explorer program, and a very brief introduction to the Seattle Explorers, and then I went to King County as an explorer out of the Southwest Burien precinct. And that's where I got introduced to then officer Patrick McCurdy, who was a newer, younger, very motivated, aggressive officer. And I think we took a liking to each other. Of course, I was looking for a mentor, but he even when I was a young man, he took a liking to me, and he's in the Explorer program. And so he took me on numerous ride-alongs. I don't even know how many ride-alongs I went on with him, but he taught me a lot about what it was to be a good police officer, treating people right, doing the right things, working with your partners, safety, all these things. And so I just remember days or nights, because we were working, I was riding along with him, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., as a teenager on those ride-alongs. I'm sure there was a couple times he'd nudge me, hey, wake up, kid. But, Patrick, even in my early days, getting introduced to law enforcement was so impactful because he's just a big personality. One, he's a big guy. He's like 6'6", and, and 200 some pounds. But beyond that, just a big personality. And now that he is a leader within King County, we still keep in contact. And we've kept in contact throughout our careers. And as I got into Seattle, and, of course, he was disappointed I went to Seattle, but still, it's still a very impactful person to me. And, even roles have reversed where, he was getting into a supervision role of supervising a proactive undercover unit, something I, had some pretty significant experience. And so we kind of chuckled when he came through my training that he's like, I taught you all of these things, Brandon, but now you're teaching me how the roles get reversed. And so through Patrick, I knew about Andrew. I don't believe I ever met Andrew, but definitely heard about him and their upbringings coming from California, and always admired that family, and of course Patrick and everything. So that's why I know the McCurdys, some awesome guys.
That's great. And something that really strikes me is that mentorship aspect very early on, and just what a value and what an impact that has. It sounds like, it's part of his personality to kind of take on that role. And some people just have it and feel that sense of obligation, maybe sense of pride, like taking you on multiple ride-alongs, trying to show you what he deemed to be, through his experience, the proper way of policing. And I'm just curious, do you think that the line of work would have had as much of appeal if it weren't for him as an individual kind of coming in and sort of being that the vehicle, so to speak, to pass on what police work meant to him?
No, I think my career path would have taken, a different trajectory, if you will.
Mhm.
I think his mentorship really helped me guide how I was going to be as a police officer, as a positional leader. You would talk about, positional, non-positional leaders. I always felt like even before I was a sergeant, whatever unit I was working in, patrol, narcotics, whatever unit I was in, although maybe I wasn't designated as the supervisor or acting supervisor or a positional leader, I always tried to be a leader within that group, and it was guys like McCurdy who really set me up for that. And I think that's huge for us in law enforcement to realize the impact that we have on young men and women to bring them up with us. And now I'm knocking on 22 years with our agency, and it's something I tried to do today is now give back. And it's hard for me to even fathom, this kind of poor kid from Berrien White Center area, and opportunities that I've had, in the police department and some of the federal task forces and stuff. But even when I look beyond where I came from and what my upbringing was, I've had these great opportunities. Now it's my turn to give back. I'm on the tail end of my career, and it's hard to even realize or recognize that. But now it's time to do what McCurdy did for me. And there are some others, in Seattle Police Department in the 90s. Did this. Some at King County Sheriff's. But McCurdy and guys like him really helped really confirm that this was the job for me, one, but also how to be a really good police officer, how to be a good leader, if that was your positional leader or not. And so that's why I think it's important for me to do that now. And very, very quickly after I got hired, I became an Explorer advisor with our agency, and did that for many years, training explorers, and I've gotten many young men and women hired and onto other positions in their life, and maybe not law enforcement, but realizing that our guidance really helps them. And there's still young men and women I impacted in the early 2000s that either are in law enforcement or had a career in law enforcement, decided to go otherwise. But I'm confident that I was able to give them some sort of guidance and help them how McCurdy helped me.
I think it seems to me like your experience having that such a strong mentor really made you seek it out more so than had you just sort of entered law enforcement without that experience. Would you say that's a true statement?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important for us to all have mentors that we look for. Like I said, even for me, 20 plus years in, supervisor, even today, I'm looking for people I can look up to. And that may be someone that's in command of me. Maybe it's someone that I look at, like, you young ladies, although you're younger on the department, the things that you guys are doing, that's the kind of stuff I'm like, man, that's impactful. That's great. And so I think it's important for all of us to set those goals and have a mentor or two or three to see that's I want to be like that person. And so we should be looking for that. And I really think that superiors, commanders, supervisors should be looking at their subordinates and providing that mentorship. I know that there's been a couple recent officers when I was in charge of some of our proactive teams that I really said, hey, I'm really going to invest in you, because we connected, we linked up. If they like my thoughts, I like their thoughts, I like the way they work, and I still, even though I'm not in direct supervision with these folks, I am still impacting them. One, trying to have them not leave the police department, and then two, just be really good family men, and and do really good whatever they decide to do.
I feel like, when you sort of connect with someone, you can smell the drive in them to be better. And that's very infectious, right? So when you smell that in someone who's maybe a little bit more rookie than you or whatever, it sort of fuels you. You're like, all right, here's my opportunity to meet that level, to rise to that occasion to which they expect, you know what I mean? And so I think that's a really cool thing. I'm curious, having done, man, I have so many questions. I'm curious, having done so much different things with the department, having that diversity within the department of different roles and coming in contact with different leaders, I'm sure that I personally think, having all those different touch points, and like you said, working for federal task force and things like that, it only enhances your ability to pick and choose different types of leadership styles, right? Like all those touch points, it's just reps with different people. And so, I'm just curious, like, did you sort of feel like your leadership style kind of be like you picking things and choosing things from different people, whereas somebody who just sticks with one sort of trajectory, it's like you kind of pigeonhole yourself and you're only as influenced by those contact points that you have?
Absolutely. You know, yeah, I've come in contact with leaders within our organization, affiliate organizations I work with, like as a federal organizations, as a task force officer. For instance, it was a leader that I met very early on in my career, Alvin. It was Big Daddy. People know who that is, but and people know how impactful he is. But he was one of the guys. When I came on the apartment, he reached out to me and said, "Hey, young man, this is how we're going to do this." And I really followed his lead. Now, there are times throughout my career that I tried to be like Big Daddy. I'll be honest, like I would say things, I would do things, and I, try to bring humor and everything. And this is what Big Daddy would say or do here. Well, one, that might get you in trouble, but two, there was just times I wasn't able to pull it off. Just quite frankly, right? And so that's why, and that's where you're taking pieces of these leaders that you come in contact with and realize that, okay, I'm not able to pull that one off like Big Daddy does. But there was a FBI supervisor I had, Carolyn, C-Dub, probably hands down my military career, my police career, one of the best bosses I ever had. And even with her organization, she did things that I probably would not be able to get away with or say or do. She was just a very strong, powerful woman within FBI. But some of the things that she did and said, how she treated her people, how her people felt after they got done working with her. So I'm pulling from Carolyn, I'm pulling from Alvin, I'm pulling from, other positional leaders, folks that work alongside me. And that's really what helps guide the way I supervise now, but also realize that it's a work in progress for me. This is something, leadership and leading people, not just managing people, but leading people is something not only do I study academically, but, obviously in person every single day, but I'm really thoughtful about, okay, if I say this to this person, what is that going to mean? What impact am I having? And, I think a lot of times supervisors don't realize, the impact that you have on your subordinates. And, maybe you say an off the cuff comment, good or bad, but your subordinates, they'll walk away and they'll kind of stew on that for days or weeks. And so it's important of, what we're saying to our folks, how we're treating our folks and what they're walking away with. And, I know for me, I try to make an impact on, every single person I'm coming in contact with that is around me in one way or another. And also realize that, hey, I'm not for everybody, like Big Daddy wasn't for everyone, but same thing, Brandon may not be for everyone. I've had employees that work for me that, for one reason or another is like, I'm not feeling Brandon. I'm not feeling Sgt.
Who's
James.
this? Let's call him right now. I got
we won't do that because as a good leader, I recognize that, okay, maybe we're butting heads a little bit, but what are your strengths? And, what is your why? What are your strengths? And let's find out, what that is and get you to a position where you could be impactful somewhere in our organization.
Right. Yep.
And, I think of, one person I was working with recently, we had that. We butted heads and that was fine, but he was a really, really good employee for the organization. And the last thing I want to do is like, well, you know what? Because you don't like Sergeant James, I'm going to derail your career for the next 15 years. And there are commanders and supervisors that do that. And I'm just not one of those people. Just because he and I had personal conflicts, he was a good employee. He had done really good things for the organization, for the precinct, and for the department. And so we found just a better place for him to move his career to the next step. And I think it's important, for leaders to recognize that in employees, even if there's a personality conflict.
What would you say some of the common threads, just personality or how they dealt with you as a subordinate, that those people that really influenced you, whether it be Alvin, which I can attest to the fact that he was an incredibly motivating personality. But what do you think, if you could identify it, are those common characteristics that really left you with that impression of them?
The fact that they cared about people. The Alvin, the Carolins, I think of Nick Metz when he was at our organization. I'm just drawing a blank because I'm in a rush, but there's been so many others that, well, heck, Wayne Johnson, Sean Jenkins. These are guys who really helped form. And really, to answer your question, is because they cared about people. And particularly some of these names I just mentioned, those are guys that when I was young on the department, and I have to admit, when I was young on the department, I was arrogant, I was cocky. And these guys were like, yo, okay, young man, slow your roll. Like, you are just, you're not understanding how we do things. And the reason they did that is because they cared about me. They cared about the people around them to do good. And they realized, okay, this kid probably has potential, but we just got to slow his roll a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I look for when I'm reaching out to someone to bring up. It's what I look for when I'm looking for someone to mentor me. Is do you actually care about the people around you? I think we were mentioning right before we got started is, my big mantra is that the mission, the job will always get accomplished. It will. It always does. Some days or maybe we perform better than others, and we do our after action reports and like, we could have done this better, could have done that better, but always the mission gets done. We work for an incredible organization with incredible people. The job will get done. And so once we get beyond that, we have to realize that taking care of our people is the first and foremost and the most important asset that we have in our organization. And our folks aren't ready to work because of personal stuff or work stuff. It's us leaders that have to look at them and realize, okay, something's going on, and really care about our people one way or another to help them out. And it might be on the personal side, might be on the professional side, but it's all about taking care of people. And once we figure that out, and you're actually genuine, not just, I care about my people. No, you need to really dive down deep about what it means for each individual person that's around you for them to be successful. And every person's different. Every person has unique experiences and what they're bringing to the table. And so people, that's my number one, and that's what I'm looking for.
I can imagine right now that that's a pretty large task, because there's so many things as a sergeant. You can deal directly with your people, but there's so many structural things right now with politics, whatever, that is just weighing really heavy on the patrol officer, the frontline officer. And I can imagine that as a role of supervisor right now, it's a very hard, especially at that level of sergeant, kind of thing to weigh. Like you said, you're talking to people just trying to keep them from leaving. So
yeah, it's been, I will tell you, at our organization, it's been a task to reach out to folks to try to tell them, stay the course at our organization, right? People are leaving right and left. And I understand why people are leaving. I get it. If they feel like they're not supported by city organization, leadership, all that. But here's what I tell folks is What is your why? Identify what your why is. And remember, when you became a police officer, was your why to be a police officer to appease the mayor, the city council? Was that your why? And almost always, that was never our why. Meaning is, why did you want to become involved in this job? And over time, our why changes. Okay. And I just remind folks, go back to your original, why did you want to be a police officer? Why do you love this job? Right? And yes, right now times are difficult, but what I also tell folks is that, this is what we are going through in law enforcement everywhere. Maybe it's at a decreased rate at a different agency, in our state, maybe a different state. It's maybe not so much, and maybe that's the case. But times are changing in law enforcement. I've been 20 plus years, right? And law enforcement looks different today than it did 20 years ago. So although our changes are going to be a little more abrupt that are coming, I mean, changes are coming. So people have to realize that whatever organization you go to in law enforcement, however it looks today, it's going to look drastically different 12 months, 24 months down the road. And if you're leaving just because you're frustrated with the city government, I say, hold on, what is your why? And why'd you get into this? Now, if you're leaving because there's some family stuff, like, hey, I want to go back to whatever city, whatever state for family, it works better financially. I can go work in Texas and get a home, free and clear. That's awesome. That's great. Love it. But as I'm talking with folks and telling them, just stay the course. We still need good people here at our agency. And I do understand why people are leaving, but the folks that, I've come in contact with, and, some people I've been able to convince to stay. Some people are like, that's great, Sarge. That's awesome. I'm out of here. And I get it. We can't convince everyone. I'm not someone who is drinking the Kool-Aid, if you will, to say that our agency is the absolute best. We've got work to do. But my point to all that is that law enforcement in general is absolutely changing. And how we serve the community is going to be changing drastically. And in whatever agency you're at, that's going to look a lot different in the very near future.
Man, yeah, I think a lot of people are moving on thinking the grass is going to be greener, but like you said, there's kind of a sea change occurring. And yeah, that's something that Lexi and I have talked a lot about too. I mean, we are trying to wrap our minds around a leadership training for our department, like not put on by us, but sort of like what themes can we present and get people who are highly qualified to present those themes. And I think coming back to the why is that's everything, that's got the staying power. I feel like, I'm curious. You talked a little, something I wanted to touch on earlier is you talked a little bit about some of the other leaders that you've come across that maybe are not as proactive in their approach to their subordinates or whatever, their people. Why do you think that is? Do you think that there's a vulnerability to leadership? Because it takes that genuine, you sort of have to, in some instances, let your guard down, not to be a robot to your folks,
Absolutely. You bring up a good point. For me, you do have to be vulnerable. It's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to show your subordinates that it's okay to make mistakes, right? We are not robots. We are dealing with life and death decisions that are split second. We want to build the training in our organizational culture to a point where that we want people to make good decisions, but sometimes we are going to make decisions that, oftentimes within seconds or minutes of making that decision, like, ooh, I wish I could take that back. Mm-hmm. As a leader, when I'm interacting with my folks, I am vulnerable. I'm vulnerable in the sense that I tell them I don't know everything. So help me, help you, help the entire organization. There's no way for me to know everything. So, so it's not just about being vulnerable, but I think it's also about being humble
Mm-hmm.
and recognizing that, yes, as a positional leader, you might have, an extraordinary amount of years in your agency, a lot of leadership and management training. And I've been to this FBI National Academy, and I've been to this Northwest leadership, and I've been to this, and I've been to that. And that's wonderful. That's great. But how vulnerable are you? How humble are you to actually learn from your mistakes, and then let your folks know that it's okay to make mistakes, but also remembering, what are we learning from those mistakes, particularly when we're dealing with younger officers who the frequency of mistakes are probably a little more increased. That it's okay to do that, but we need to be honest with ourselves. We need to be honest with the process when we do make those mistakes. How is the leadership dealing with that? And that really starts with, us as supervisors, as commanders, showing the example. When I make a mistake, how is that? And I come forward and I say, hey guys, I made a mistake in that situation, and here's how we do it. And I do that routinely in our debriefs. I was in charge of our two of our anti-crime teams, and after every single search warrant, dynamic service search warrant, high risk, or not high risk, but arrest operation, we always did an after action debrief. And I would always say that, hey, my stripes are coming off. We are all same rank here. If I made mistakes, officers, detectives, I need to know about it, because even as a leader, the decisions I make affect not only me, but my subordinates, but obviously our organization. So yeah, being humble, being vulnerable, letting your folks know that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay not to know everything, right? And we don't have to go around beating our chest that we have all the answers, because we just don't. We're human.
Mm.
And and I especially, uh, the officers and detectives that are coming up today are so incredibly smart. They are so incredibly advanced in technology and well-read, well-educated. And for leaders to think that, oh, just because they have 3, 4, 5 years on, or whatever significant less time than I have on as a supervisor, to think that they can't teach me something is, I think that's setting yourself up for failure. To realize that, this person may only have 3 years on. I have a gentleman that works for me, or maybe got 5 years on or so. He's already in detectives and working for me, but he comes with a background, kind of like you guys come with a background that's tremendous in our line of work of internet crimes. And so, I often have to go to him and be humble, like, all right, man, I'm a dummy here. You got to teach me. You got to show me. You got to tell me. And and that's okay to do that. And he knows I come from a place that I'm trying to make him better, me better, our unit better, our department better. And he knows that I'm being vulnerable, and it's okay. And it's okay to laugh at yourself. It's fine. It's as a as a leader, it's okay when you make a mistake, you do something. Laugh at yourself and move on and learn from it.
I think you mentioned a couple of things that brought some things to mind for me, but your debriefs, like, that is a form of training to me. You're training, you're doing the mental rep again, you're seeing like how you hit those points. I think, departments probably everywhere are dealing with the same thing of having a very young patrol officer focus right now, because a lot of those officers 5-10 years are leaving, maybe not to be in law enforcement anymore, or another department. A lot of people are retiring, or they're already in a detective position. So there's just a lot of like new officers hitting the street together. They're excited, that's great, but there may not be that, kind of mentorship within the officers themselves. So I see that, sergeants are probably going to have to take on like an even bigger role in making sure that they are mentoring, they are training. And what would be some ways you could see sergeants doing that with their patrol officers specifically?
I think it's important, particularly when I was on the street, up until just recently, especially in the anti-crime teams, is that to accomplish that very goal, Lexi, was I was out on the street with them, showing them how I wanted things to be done, how the decisions that I expected from them to make. I was showing them by example how I wanted them to treat people, and maybe particularly people maybe that look different from them, talk different from them. I was showing them how I wanted them to interact with those individuals. These younger officers, they just don't have the reps, right? And so they
Mhm.
need someone to show them what that means. And most of us in this line of work are, visual learners, right?
Mhm.
Hands-on. And so for me as a leader, I always say I'm not going to ask my subordinates to do anything I'm not willing to do myself. If that means, I'm in the trenches, I'm searching, nasty pockets, I am writing vehicle impound reports. I'm talking to an upset mother of a juvenile. Whatever it is, I'm asking my subordinates to do, particularly of a young subordinate. If I see that they're new to this and that decision-making process isn't quite clicking, I'm going to show them exactly, what I expect, and so they see it. Of course we've already talked about it in the training. You talk about debriefs, roll calls, but then they're actually going to see, oh, okay, I see what Sarge's expectation is, because they actually see it. It's me a lot more than just me talking to them from the sergeant's desk, and me, ridiculing them because they made a bad decision. No, I'll be out in the street with them, shoulder to shoulder. And it was hard because there are officers and squads like, well, we don't always want the sergeant around, and so it's a balance that I get. You don't always want the sergeant on all your calls, but for me, it was all about showing what my expectation was, and I'm just even as a supervisor, I'm just proactive in the sense of being out there on the street with folks, and if you're not, I don't know, as a squad supervisor, how are you really evaluating your folks? Is it just by paperwork? But you really got to evaluate them by watching them and experiencing the decisions that they make outside of the training environment, but actually a real environment, and not, just not just looking at their paperwork or just listening to other folks on the squad. Showing them by example, and then watching them as they do it, and then tweaking them a little bit, and that could be a positive of walking away from the call. It's like, hey, young man, young woman, let's think about doing it this way next time, and still turn it into a positive, so that they don't walk away from that experience with a negative, interaction.
Man, you have provided an excellent segue to kind of like the trickle down effect of great leadership is, I mean, at least in our view, one of the biggest byproducts of that is just our relationship with the community, right? So you've got better people on the street making better decisions because they know the onus is on them, and they have the confidence and the leadership and mentorship that has enabled them to make those better decisions and have better rapport with the community. And you're out there doing it by example. And that may not be the most popular way to do it, but that is certainly the most effective. And I wanted to, I wanted to talk a little bit more about that because, I'm not sure if you have thought much about how that, I'm sure maybe you have, but how those young officers who come in, they're not just young in terms of their time on the job, but there is something to their actual chronological, biological age, right? There's something to having experience. Like when Lexi and I came to police work, we were at least 30 years old, right? And so just having dealt with difficult situations and, just more life experience sort of puts you in a position just to level with the community, I think, a little bit better. And so there's a huge learning curve for people who are not only new to the job, but are also just sort of young in general. And having a visual example of that is I mean, got to be exponentially helpful to them. And I'm just curious from your perspective, you know, as a kid growing up and having influences from your Explorer program and through the years of your training and stuff, you know, can you talk a little bit about the community aspect of police in the community? I know that's kind of a broad subject, but you might have a, you know, some good nuggets for us in terms of leadership and its ability to translate to community relations.
Yeah, you know, police and community relations, right? I mean, probably the biggest topic beyond police use of force in current times, right? You know, for me, the relationship between the police and community comes down to one of the major pieces is that we all understand this, but we don't do it very well, and that's communication. And I say that because oftentimes the community, and it doesn't, you know, really matter which community it is the community in general, they usually don't understand why we do the things we do. Everything from why do we position our car on a traffic stop, and you know, why is there a second and third police officer there on a traffic stop, to, you know, all the way up to a deadly force encounter, and why we do the things we do. And it's communication. So once again, you know, getting back to showing young officers the expectation is communicating. And so when it is possible, I'm a huge advocate in law enforcement that we take the time to, at a particular scene, at an incident, to do our best to communicate. And sometimes that's going to be very difficult because of emotions. I get it, I understand. And oftentimes it may take someone who wasn't involved, like a sergeant or a lieutenant, to come on scene and say, you know, community, you know, let me hear your concerns, let me hear your grievances, and let me explain to you, you know, from my stance as a supervisor, why we did what we did. And we may not always, and oftentimes we don't come to a mutual understanding or mutual agreement, but at least they had a chance to hear us. And more importantly, we had a chance to hear them. And oftentimes, you know, the community members that we're dealing with, you know, as we all talk about, we don't deal with folks on a beautiful, bright, sunny day in their lives. You are usually dealing with folks on a very tragic day, or even if it's, they're not dealing with law enforcement often, but it's you know, they were a victim of a burglary, or they got pulled over on a traffic stop. You know, just taking that time for every single incident to explain the why of what we're doing. And so that's just that communication piece with the community. And you know, so that, you know, there's some onus on the community as well to listen to us, to hear, you know, our explanation. But we also need to take that time to be genuine and to be honest and open as much as possible, to share the, you know, our whys. And you know, because a lot of people, they just don't get it, they don't understand. You know, they, you know, unfortunately they're living you know, through media and the CSI effect, and you know, everything gets solved in 44 minutes of TV on an hour-long show, in a law enforcement show. And in reality, you know, we know that it's much different. And so, you know, and it shouldn't really have to take a sergeant or a commander to come on scene to do that. Someone at all these incidents just take the time, once everything is calmed down and slowed down, and you know, at least, you know, identify, you know, if it's a crowd of people, identify, you know, someone who's kind of maybe in control of their thoughts, you know, that's being reasonable, but also someone that may have some impact on the rest of the community that you're dealing with, to explain what's going on. You know, I remember even doing that during you know, all the June protests. And you know, I was at a fence at, you know, the precinct that we gave up before, you know, just hours before we gave it up, and I had a line of community members black, white, everything in between. And I was almost just given a sermon of the why of police. And I wish I could pull it up on my phone. I wish I could share it with you. But as I walked away to go deal with something in law enforcement related, I come back and I just think about it. I hope I can find it on my phone really fast. But it was a note that a young gal who was part of this crowd, and I remember her specifically. She tore off a little note and she stuck it in the fence, and she said, "Officer James." Well, she demoted me, but that was okay. She says, I wish I could find it. "Officer James, essentially, I'm paraphrasing. Thank you for taking the time just to talk with us."
Mm.
And I had a couple other really nice lines in there, but it really showed me that if we just take the time to talk, how impactful it can be. Now, granted, that was one person. There was also one person in that same conversation who didn't matter what I said, how I handled myself. He called me every single name in the book, including derogatory racial names. As he said, Black Lives Matter, and he was a white guy, and he was calling me racial names, saying Black Lives Matter, and just the absurdity of that. It was kind of taken back by that. But the point of that is you won't be able to reach out to everyone, and that's okay. But that like the lady who left a note, and I'm sure that others who didn't leave a note did walk away with, wow, okay, at least you took the time to communicate. And the other important aspect of that is the 10 cops that were behind me who saw that and were like, wow, we're dealing with all these protests, we're dealing with, they're trying to take our precinct, they're all these things. And there's a supervisor who's actually just taking the time to have a conversation. And so I think everybody benefits. The community benefits, the police benefit, and we're just communicating. And like I said, we're not always going to agree, but at least we're talking about these issues.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think one thing you said that is, I think officers, you don't understand, is that it's going to take time. Like you might go to a call that's just a simple burglary call, but maybe that store owner has been burglarized over and over and over and over again and never, and been brushed off. And you just standing there and listening to them air their grievances might alleviate some of that, but it will take longer than just going in, writing down the facts and leaving, And I think that that's something that we all should take to heart, that, sometimes it may not be related directly to the crime. There might be a couple calls holding, but it does matter to take that extra time, to go that extra step, to make those connections. And you might find out, information that you wouldn't have in the first place because you just kind of dug a little deeper and had that conversation. So I think that's a really important point, is that, time and patience and giving that space for it.
Yeah, and both sides need to be open and be willing to listen. Police, we need to be willing to listen to the community, and then also community, hopefully is listening to what we're saying, and and just coming to the table with just open, honest hearts and minds.
Absolutely.
What else, Lexi? Do you have? I have a few more questions. Do you have anything?
Go for it, Callie.
I just wanted to kind of go back because I'm curious. Are there leaders in your life or people who heavily influenced you that were not in law enforcement?
Good question. Not leaders, not in law enforcement. I will say yes. I'll give a wonderful, great shout out to my mom, right? Mom's was always a big part of that because of her work ethic. She was a leader at the Kingdom and then ultimately at Safeco Field. There's many police officers in our area who have worked at those venues who know my mom. She loves cops. She would do anything for cops. But her work ethic, as I watched that over the years, was tremendous. She just recently retired, and she absolutely hates being retired because she misses work and she misses interacting with people. So one was my mom, but I'm trying to think. I know. Yes. faith-based leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's something I talk about when I'm doing my training classes. It's something I talk about within my work squads. That if you have faith, that's great. If you don't, I'm not that person that it tries to push it on anyone. But whatever your faith is, whatever it looks like, and whatever you believe in, a pet rock, whatever, it doesn't matter to me. I do look for that leadership in faith-based leaders, and I've had a couple over the years, and it's those kind of folks that outside of work that really help us stay grounded, and realize that this job is a job. It doesn't make you. It's your family. It's everything else outside of this job that makes you you. So there have been leaders outside of law enforcement that have been impactful, but it's just those are kind of folks that really help me realize that there's something bigger to each of us rather than this job. And that's what I try to tell my folks. I'm working with them that don't let this job consume you, and the fact that you are giving up time, and you're always going to give up time from your family to the job, but managing that the best way you can, because when it comes down to it, all the great work that any of us do in an organization, that will be quickly forgotten. But who won't forget the birthday that you missed, or the first home run that they hit, or the first dance recital is your kids. They will not forget that. And I tell people all the time, especially my training classes, when we start talking about leadership and people, is that I believe that I've done some pretty impactful investigations over the years. Probably things that you guys maybe not even heard about, with undercover stuff. I did wiretap cases where we took down some pretty dangerous people. I was involved as one of the case agents for a potential attack on the military entrance processing station. Back in 2011. All right, those are things that people will quickly forget about. And this really kind of hit home for me in the past few years, as kind of younger generation of the police department comes on. They look at Sergeant James, he's old. What has he done? What does he know? And where I've had younger detectives kind of come to me and almost talk to me like I don't even know what the heck I'm talking about when it comes to investigation. And I've done everything from drugs to terrorism and everything in between, short of homicide. And it just was a good reminder for me that what, they just don't know, and that's okay, and that's fine. But it was a good reminder for me that you need to focus a lot of the energy at home, because it'll be my kids. I have a 12-year-old son and a 9-year-old daughter. That's my focus. And everybody says our kids and our families are the focus, but really, are you balancing your work and your life in a manner in which your kids will remember that they saw you at their events, that you were there for them and with them. And it is a hard balance as a working father. Now, I'm a working single father now, so it's a very difficult balance. But it is super important because, especially when it was early in my career, I was running and gunning and, trying to do all these wiretaps and all this undercover stuff and all this fancy casework and all these different things. And when it really comes down to it, a lot of that stuff is not going to be remembered. It's not going to be memorialized in any way, any shape or form. So, really focusing on doing a good job for what you can do for the organization, absolutely. But for your family, recognizing, that, the time that you have with them is the absolute most important, because those are the ones that will remember, is the kids. They'll remember, if you were there or not. Not this agency, not any agency, wherever you're at, across the nation, because yeah, that's just the nature of the beast. As soon as Sergeant James leaves out of this position, the next person's going to come in, fill my shoes, hopefully do a better job, and I'll be forgotten about.
Don't you say that. Don't you
But it'll happen,
say
and so that's
that.
it's the kids that remember. So it's take care of your
Yeah.
families. Take care of your families.
Kind of connected to that. This will be probably my last question. This is a loaded one. This is kind of hard because it's something that I grapple with. But why is it that when we reach a certain age, or we sort of get, I don't know, maybe it's age. I'm not sure what variables contribute to it, but why at a certain point does mentorship sort of dissolve from the scene, right? Like, I have people that I look up to, but I don't have, I guess I don't have mentors like I did maybe 5, 10 years ago. Is that true with you too? And I mean, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think just over time, you get comfortable with where you're at in your
Mm,
organization. You get comfortable in your job. You get comfortable doing your day in and day out. And as you get comfortable, you're like, well, okay, I'm comfortable. I know how to do my job. I'm very proficient at what I'm doing. And I think this is where we talk about pushing yourself to be uncomfortable, pushing yourself to do something different. And then once you're doing something different, you would need, oftentimes, you would look for someone to help you out.
mhm.
For instance, I run internet crimes against children. It's not something that either of you are particularly involved in right now. But if we were to put you there on Monday morning, you would be out of your comfort zone, and you would say, Brandon, Sergeant James, I need some mentorship. I need some guidance. And so I think this is just us at work pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone. So if it's a police officer, patrol officer, okay, you're comfortable doing your day in, day out. What can you do better?
Mhm.
How can you better impact the organization? If that means writing more search warrants, if that means doing a little more follow up, it could mean a whole sorts of things. But as you start doing different things, you're going to need some guidance. And I think just over time, like I mentioned, you get comfortable. He's like, okay, well, I don't need any more guidance. And so making yourself uncomfortable. Same thing, like, I know you guys are in the gym. I stay in the gym as well. And, as you are pushing your body to the uncomfortable level, the people around you are helping you do that. I mean, maybe Callie has that switch. I don't have that switch to do that by myself in the gym. I just don't. For me, I have to be surrounded by people to mentor me, to guide me, to push me. And, so if it's in the gym, pushing yourself, it's at work, pushing yourself, that mentorship, yeah, I think it just dies off at a certain level. And, even, Callie, I know you're big into, both of you guys big into fitness, but Callie, you've been a coach and stuff, and I'm sure you get to a level of just proficiency. Okay, now what's next? Now it's just pushing yourself to that next level, right? And same thing at work is pushing yourself outside of that comfort zone. And when you do that, you're going to need some guidance, and that means what's next in your career. I was just talking to a young officer just at the gym who is at our agency just yesterday, and he's got 10, 11 years on. I'm like, what's next, man? Like, you guys start setting yourself up for what's next. And I'll continue to be a mentor and provide guidance for him.
Yeah, we always say if you're the strongest person in the gym, you better find a different gym. So that's a good kind of analogy for that. Is there anything that you wanted to touch on that maybe we haven't asked you about? That's kind of I know we covered a lot of ground.
Well, yeah, we covered a lot of ground. For me, just to sum it up, is that through all the experiences, professional experiences that I've had, and they've been great and tremendous. It all comes back to making sure that the people around us are taken care of. And, we didn't even get to some of the, very specific examples of things I've done throughout the years. But, we have to take care of the people around us. And, so professionally, absolutely making sure that, maybe it's your coworker, it's your peer, looking out for one another, making sure that they're doing okay. And if they're not, it's okay to say so. Like, if I see that Callie is not doing so well, Callie, wait, hey, what's up, sister? What's going on? And, and calling people out on is not okay. We have more people in law enforcement taking their own lives than other people taking their lives. And so, that's huge for us to look out for one another. So taking care of your people first and foremost, professionally. And like I just mentioned a few minutes ago, personally, just making sure that each of us at home are doing what we need to do for our families, for our spouses, for our boyfriends, girlfriends, our loved ones, our children, all that, to be just as successful or even more successful at home than we are at work. And then if we are successful at home, we know at home is kicking butt. We're doing a great job at work, or excuse me, everything's great at home. We come to work ready to rock and roll. Our heads in it. We can be safer. We can actually look after our peers and partners and have some fun and do some really great work while we're at work. And then when we're done with that, we head home back to our families to spend that quality time. So let's take care of one another professionally and personally. And I just wish everyone the best. And take care of yourselves, take care of each other. And I'm supporting what cops are doing, and let's just continue to do really good work out there.
Yeah, I know you said you didn't talk specifically about some of the things that you've done in your leadership position for your folks. But I have heard those things. I've trained under you. And so I've heard those anecdotes. And furthermore, I wanted to say, something I kind of been thinking about is when I went to train in your school, I was sort of thinking the whole time, because leadership is something that kind of rolls around in my head frequently, but leadership reminds me of like athleticism, right? It's a bunch of components that people have trained, these individual fine-tuned things that they've trained to seamlessly and effortlessly put them together, right? And when you see it, it's beautiful, and you don't know how to like identify each of those little things that they've honed over time and chiseled away at. But when they're all put together, it's like, it when you see it, you can feel it, you can sense it. And when I went to train with you, that's exactly what I sensed. It was like, if there was a single person in the room that wasn't like, I want to work for this guy, I mean, then they weren't paying attention. Because I'm not trying to like blow smoke up you, but that's also part of the reason, I feel so fortunate to have you on the show, is because you embody those things that have kind of been honed over time. And just because leadership is one of those elusive things that is often hard to define because it comes in a lot of various forms and personalities. It's something that I think you exhibit, and I just appreciate you sharing your thoughts on the subject with us today.
Well, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. You may cut you off there, but
No.
Leadership has been so very important to me. Like I said, I study it academically. I study it in person every single day. I'm very thoughtful about what I'm saying, what I'm doing to impact my subordinates. How I'm impacting my superiors, and in recognizing how important, especially at my level, that first line leadership position is so important in a police organization, because you can have all the policies and everything that the chiefs and commanders are saying, but it's that first line supervisor that has to embody those and then spread that culture out to the working body, and to the officers, to the detectives, to really make progress within the organization. And so I really feel that as I go through my career, I'm constantly trying to pick up on things and learn things, and So when I found your guys' podcast and your website, you guys are doing a tremendous job yourselves of identifying what is leadership, particularly in police leadership. So, Callie and Lexi, keep up the great job and get some more really good leaders on here for all of us to learn from. And so I look forward to that.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Sarge.
Thank you, Sarge.